Dry Cedar Valley, New Mexico Territory, 1889. Clara Reeves hung limp against a splintered fence post, her bruised wrists lashed tight by 3 Red Rock riders, their boots kicking dust across her tear-soaked face. One of them yanked her hair back, forcing her to watch another man strike a match and wave it inches from her skin. Their laughter was cruel. That's what bankers do to girls who can't pay their debts. Her breath hitched as cold terror swept through her. No one was coming. Not from Twin Mesas. Not from town. Not from anywhere. For a split second, she wondered if dying here would hurt less than living with the shame she carried. No one will look for me. No one will mourn me, she thought, the truth cutting deeper than any rope burn. Before we continue, if you're watching this from anywhere in the world, leave your city name in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The clinic. Clara Reeves woke to the smell of carbolic and old wood, and a pain living in every inch of her skin. For a moment she didn't know where she was. All she felt was the burn in her wrists, the throb in her ribs, the split in her lip when she breathed too deep. Then memory slammed back. Rough hands, drunk laughter, the splintered fence post digging into her spine, rope biting bone, and a shadow cutting through the dawn, a gloved hand holding a knife, a deep voice she never heard, only felt. Steady, certain, a promise made of silence. "The fence," she rasped, eyes barely open. "They tied me to the fence." "That they did," a woman answered, warm and firm all at once. "And they're gonna answer for it, if I have anything to say." Clara blinked up at Doc Maribel Ortiz. Dark hair in a quick knot, sleeves rolled, hands steady as she checked the bandage at Clara's temple. "You're in my clinic," Doc said. "Dry Cedar. You've been out most of a day. You were half dead from the sun when he brought you in." "He..." Clara's throat scraped like sand. The man with the black hat?" Doc huffed softly. "Black hat, black coat, black skin, bad attitude. That one. Found you at first light. From the bruising, I count at least 4 sets of boots had a turn at you. That wasn't just some drunk fool. Level, moderate." That was a message. "Red Rock Riders," Clara whispered. Saying it out loud made the room tilt. "They think if they break me, my father'll sell." "Twin Mesas is all that old man's got," Doc said softly. "They know it. They push on his soft spot." Her fingers paused at Clara's ribs. "Breathe shallow. You got 2 cracked, maybe 3. You're lucky they didn't stomp harder." Lucky. The word felt ugly. "Papa?" Clara forced out. "Is he... Did someone tell him?" "He knows you're alive," Doc said. "Lucy rode out, brought him word. He's at the ranch now, trying to keep his boys from doing something stupid. He'll be in as soon as I let him." Then Doc hesitated. Her voice lowered. "You remember anything else? Faces? Voices?" Clara shut her eyes. She remembered a high, cruel laugh. Cheap whiskey, someone saying, "Let Pike have the land after this. He's paid enough for it." And then, quiet hoofbeats, a knife sliding through rope like thread. "He didn't say a word," she murmured. "The man who cut me down didn't look at me like I was ruined, just picked me up and rode." Doc Ortiz gave a tired smile. "That sounds like him." "Him who?" "Doesn't matter yet," Doc said. "You need to heal before you start worrying about anybody else's ghosts." She paused. "Tell me something, Clara. How deep's your papa in with Harlan Pike?" The question cut sharper than any scalpel. Heat rushed into Clara's cheeks, not from fever. "We're behind," she admitted. "Bad harvest, sick cattle. Pike raised the interest. Papa's been trying to catch up." Doc's voice sharpened. "How far behind are you, honey?" Clara's hand moved to her chest on instinct, the place she always kept it. But she touched only thin hospital gown and bruised skin. She froze. Her breath hitched. Ribs screamed. She patted frantically at her chest, her sides, the blanket. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." "Clara," Doc said quietly, "what are you looking for?" "There was a paper," Clara forced out. "A contract. I signed," her voice cracked. "I signed myself over to Pike. 6 months in his house for clearing Papa's debt. It was in my pocket. It was right here." She clawed at the fabric again. Nothing. Time was 700 mums. A strange, double-edged feeling washed over her. Relief so fierce it made her dizzy, and terror so cold it hollowed her out. If the contract was gone, she wasn't sold. If the contract was gone, Pike still owned every cent, and she'd thrown away the only ugly, desperate plan she had. Doc rested a hand on her shoulder. "That paper wasn't on you when he carried you in. Whoever tied you to that fence took it, or dropped it." Clara stared at the ceiling, eyes burning. Without the contract, she wasn't branded property. Without the contract, she had nothing. Outside, a chair scraped on the porch. Heavy boots shifted. Spurs jingled softly. Clara knew, without seeing, the black rancher was still out there, keeping watch over a girl who no longer belonged anywhere. For the first time since the rope cinched her wrists, Clara Reeves let herself cry. Clara drifted in and out of sleep as afternoon light warmed the clinic walls. Every time she woke, the same steady sound met her. Boots shifting on the old porch boards, slow and patient as breathing. Lucy Ortiz, the doctor's niece, peeked into the room with a bowl of broth. "He's still out there," she whispered, like it was a secret she shouldn't enjoy sharing. "Ain't moved more than an inch since sunrise." Clara pushed herself up on her elbows, wincing. "Why?" Lucy shrugged, her dark braids swaying. "Maybe he thinks whoever hurt you might come back. Maybe he don't trust our sheriff. Maybe he's one of those men who guards a thing he set his mind on." She hesitated. He didn't let me near you till Doc said it was safe. Clara's stomach fluttered with something she didn't have the strength to name. Can I see him? Lucy nodded toward the window. Clara swallowed and eased herself to the bed's edge. Pain knifed through her ribs, but she managed to part the curtain just enough. There he was. Malachi Boone. Tall, broad, still coated in trail dust from the night before. Black coat shrugged off his shoulders, hat brim low over his eyes. His hands moved with quiet purpose, shaving curls off a strip of leather, as if the world wasn't whispering his name 2 streets over. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the road, like the danger that stole her breath might return any second. Lucy leaned beside her. Dry Cedar don't treat folks like him kindly, she murmured. He knows it. Sheriff knows it. But he still stayed. As if summoned by the words, heavy bootsteps thudded across the porch. Sheriff Dalton Cage filled the doorway, badge glinting, jaw tight. Afternoon, Doc, he drawled, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Heard our rescuee is awake. Doc Ortiz didn't smile. She needs rest. Keep your voice down. Cage ignored that, planting himself beside Clara's bed as if he owned the place. You remember much from last night? He asked. Clara's pulse quickened. Bits. Cage eased his thumbs under his suspenders. Funny thing. Malachi Boone out riding alone at sunrise. Always nearby when trouble hits. Makes a man wonder. Clara stiffened. She didn't know Malachi. Didn't owe him anything. But something in her rebelled at the way the sheriff said his name, like it was dirt on his tongue. Doc Ortiz stepped between them. Sheriff, unless you got evidence, leave your assumptions on the porch. Cage smirked. All I'm saying is, if the young lady suggests he played a part, I'll do what needs doing. Dry Cedar don't take kindly to violence, especially not from... He stopped, eyes flicking toward the porch, from him. The word wasn't spoken, but Clara felt it. Felt the injustice of it like a bruise forming under her skin. I never saw his face, she said quickly, but he saved me. Cage's brows lifted. Not surprised, just disappointed she hadn't chosen the story he wanted. Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me. He tipped his hat and left with heavy, self-important steps. Through the window, Clara saw Malachi glance sideways, just a flicker, as the sheriff passed him. Not fear, not anger, just bracing. Like a man hit by the same storm too many times. Lucy whispered, You should talk to him, least thank him. But Clara wasn't sure she could. Something about him made her chest tighten. Not from fear, but from the strange, trembling feeling of being seen even when he wasn't looking at her. Outside, Malachi set aside the leather, stood, and adjusted his hat. He looked at the clinic door as if deciding whether to walk in or disappear like a ghost. For the first time since the Fencepost, Clara felt something loosen inside her. A small, stubborn hope. The kind a girl keeps quiet in case it breaks. The sun dipped low by the time Elias Reeves rode into dry cedar. Dust on his boots, panic in his eyes. He pushed past Doc Ortiz the moment she opened the door, dropping to his knee beside the bed. "Clara, sweetheart, look at me." His voice cracked. Elias Reeves, a man who'd held a ranch together with grit and prayer, sounded like a man watching his world hang by a thread. "I'm alive, Papa," Clara whispered. "Just sore." Elias pressed his forehead to her hand. "They'll pay for what they did. By God, they'll—" "No!" Doc Ortiz cut him off. "You go stirring up trouble. You'll just get yourself killed. She needs rest." Elias swallowed hard, anger softening into exhausted shame. "Let's get you home," he said quietly. "Your own bed, your own roof." Clara nodded. She didn't want to spend one more minute in a room that smelled of pain and rope burn. Elias lifted her carefully, and she bit down a cry as her ribs protested. Outside, lanterns flickered across the dusty street. Malachi Boone stood at the bottom of the porch steps. He didn't reach for her, didn't ask if she was all right. He just adjusted his hat and said, "I'll ride ahead. Make sure the road's clear." Elias eyed him with an expression Clara couldn't read. Part gratitude, part suspicion, part something he was too proud to name. But Malachi didn't wait for it. He mounted his horse and disappeared into the fading light, like a shadow that had chosen a direction. Scene: Twin Mesas Ranch. Twin Mesas Ranch was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. Even the cattle seemed to sense Clara needed stillness. Elias settled her in her room and stepped out to speak with the hands. Clara couldn't sleep, not with her heartbeat pounding like her body remembered the fence post too well. She slipped out to the front porch, drawn by a pull she couldn't explain. Malachi sat on the edge of the steps, rifle resting across his knees, watching the tree line. He didn't turn when she approached, but she knew he'd heard her by the way his shoulders lifted just slightly. "You didn't have to stay," she murmured. "I know." "Then, why did you?" Malachi's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, "I've seen what those riders do when they think nobody's watching. Thought it best someone did." Clara lowered herself onto the step beside him. The night air was cool, and the ache in her ribs pulsed with each breath. "I remember you cutting me free," she said. His hands stilled on the rifle. "That wasn't bravery," he murmured. "Just something that needed doing." Clara's eyes drifted to the leather cord on his wrist. Knotted, worn, dark with years of dust and riding. "What's that?" Malachi hesitated, then slid it off. It was a long strip of braided leather. He pulled a loose strand from the end and began weaving it with quick, practiced fingers. "My father taught me to braid 'em," he said softly. "Said a man should always carry something that reminds him who he is and who he ain't." He finished the loop and held it out. "This one's for you." "For me?" Clara's voice trembled. Malachi didn't smile, but his eyes softened. Figure you may need reminding. You ain't a debt, ain't a contract, ain't something a banker can put his hands on. This, he tapped the little leather loop, is proof someone saw you as more than what they tried to make you. Clara closed her fingers around the braid. Warm, steady, human. A piece of something she thought she'd lost. Thank you, she whispered. Malachi rose slowly, hat brim casting half his face in shadow. Get some rest, Clara. I'll be close. And for the first time since the rope tore her skin, Clara Reeves felt something fragile settle in her chest. A quiet, growing warmth. A sense that maybe she wasn't alone in this valley after all. The next morning, Clara's ribs still burned, but Elias insisted they ride into town. Harlan Pike sent word, he said tightly. Says he's got a plan to help us. Cheaper interest. Maybe a new contract. Clara's stomach twisted. Papa, we shouldn't trust him. We don't have many folks left to trust, Elias answered, and that hurt her more than the bruises. When they reached Dry Cedar, Harlan Pike was already waiting outside the bank. Slick smile, polished boots, eyes like a hawk circling roadkill. Miss Reeves, he greeted, voice dripping with concern he didn't mean. You look, well, considering. Elias stiffened. Let's just talk business. Pike ushered them inside like they were old friends. The bank was quiet. Too quiet. Just a ticking clock, and the faint smell of ink and metal. Now, Pike began, folding his hands, given recent misfortunes, I'm willing to renegotiate your family's debt. A generous offer, truly. Clara felt something cold slither down her spine. What kind of renegotiation? Pike's eyes flicked over her, calculating, hungry. A private arrangement, he said. You and I discussed terms alone. A woman of your resilience could be worth more than cattle prices. Elias shot to his feet. You keep your eyes off my daughter. Sit down, Reeves, Pike said mildly. You're the one drowning in debt, not me. Clara stood, breath shaking with anger and shame. We're not agreeing to anything like that. Pike's smile thinned. Then you'd best pray for a miracle. While the two men argued, Clara drifted toward a hallway behind the counter. A vault door hung slightly open. Someone careless. Inside, stacks of papers sat piled in metal drawers. She wasn't snooping. Not really. Just looking. Her gaze snagged on a familiar shape. A deed. A property transfer. She pulled it halfway out and froze. Under the fresh black ink reading Reeves Twin Mesas Ranch, another layer of faded writing showed through like a ghost rising from underneath. Boone Homestead. Her breath left her. At once. Boone. Malachi. Boone. This ranch, her ranch, had once belonged to his family. Suddenly Pike's shadow fell over her. That drawer, he said softly, is not for your eyes. He snatched the paper from her hand, shoved it back into the drawer, and slammed it shut. but he couldn't honk at the flicker of fear in his eyes. Clara stepped back, voice trembling but firm. "Was that land stolen?" Pike laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Boone had no legal claim," he said. "Laws favored proper men back then, not drifters, not coloreds." His tone shifted, low and threatening. "You forget what you saw, Miss Reeves, or your family might lose more than cattle." She opened her mouth, but Elias grabbed her arm. "We're leaving." Outside, the whispers were already waiting. "Look at her, riding in with that Boone boy last night." No wonder trouble follows them. Mixed company breeds mixed problems. Clara felt every word like grit under her skin. Across the street, Malachi stood beside his horse, expression unreadable. But when his eyes found hers, they softened. Just a fraction. And that tiny softness nearly broke her. Because for the first time, she wasn't just fighting debt. She wasn't just fighting shame. She was fighting a whole valley built on lies someone wanted buried, and she had no idea how deep the roots went. Clara barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the faded words Boone Homestead bled through her thoughts like a bruise that refused to heal. By dawn, Twin Mesas felt wrong. Too still, too watchful. Even the horses paced their stalls like they sensed something coming. Malachi rode up before breakfast, dust on his coat, jaw clenched hard. Elias met him on the porch, arms crossed like a man ready for a fight he didn't truly want. "What are you doing here, Boone?" Elias asked. "Riders were spotted near your east line," Malachi said. "Red Rock boys. They're not drifting. They're gathering." Elias let out a long, slow curse. "Damn scavengers." "You need your people ready," Malachi continued. "Move the women to the storm cellar. Lock your stock in the stone pen. Tonight won't be quiet." Clara stepped out onto the porch, hand pressed to her ribs. "You think they're coming back?" Her voice shook. "For me?" Malachi's eyes softened. "Just for a heartbeat. Not just for you." His gaze shifted to Elias. "They want leverage, and they want documents." Elias stiffened. "My papers are locked away." "Pike doesn't care where they're locked," Malachi replied. "He cares that you've seen something you shouldn't." Clara felt the words hit the air like a stone through glass. Elias shot her a look. Sharp, panicked. "What did you see?" Clara hesitated. The memory of the faded ink burned in her chest. "Something in Pike's vault," she said softly. "Something about our land." Elias's face tightened. Not confusion. Fear. A kind of fear Clara had never seen on him. "Clara," he warned gently, "there are some things your daddy had no choice about." "No choice," she murmured, heat rising behind her eyes. "Papa, is our ranch even ours? Was it—" "We are not having this talk now," Elias snapped, voice shaking. "We got enough trouble without digging up graves." Malachi watched them quietly, expression unreadable, but heavy with some old understanding. Clara felt her knees weaken. "So it's true. Elias dragged a hand down his face. Girl, I was a young man trying to keep you fed. Folks said the previous owners ran off. Sheriff approved the sale. I didn't know the truth until later. And by then, his voice broke. By then you were small, and this was all we had. Clara looked from her father's guilt to Malachi's silence, and something in her cracked. How am I supposed to trust either of you? She whispered. Elias stepped toward her, but Malachi lifted a hand, not to stop her, but to stop him. She needs the truth, Malachi said softly, not excuses. And you? Elias shot back. You think she should trust you? This ain't your fight anymore. Malachi's jaw flexed. Maybe not. But those riders are coming whether you believe me or not. And when they do, your daughter will be caught in the middle. Doc Ortiz arrived with Lucy, both carrying boxes of supplies. Boys, Doc said sharply, put your pride away. That storm rolling in ain't the weather. If they hit, it'll be tonight. Lucy slipped her hand into Clara's. We'll keep you safe, she whispered. But Clara no longer knew who we was. Her father, Malachi, the ranch, the truth she wasn't ready to face. Outside, the sky darkened early, thick clouds rolling in like a warning from the mountains. A storm was coming. One made of bullets, lies, and long-buried guilt. And Clara Reeves felt herself pulled in two directions at once, torn between the family she came from and the man who'd cut her free. Thunder rolled in earlier than any storm had the right to. By nightfall, Twin Mesa's ranch was swallowed in a bruised sky, the kind that presses on a person's chest like a warning hand. Clara helped Lucy carry blankets to the cellar when the first rifle shot cracked through the dark. Not lightning, gunfire. Get down, Malachi shouted from the yard. Red Rock riders poured out of the tree line like wolves let off the chain. Torches swayed in their fists. Their horses tore through the mud, hooves ripping up the earth Malachi once called home. Clara froze at the window until the barn roof erupted in flame. No, she whispered. Papa! Elias ran toward the blaze, rifle in hand. Get to the cellar, Clara, now! But the riders weren't aiming for the barn. They were aiming for him. Clara saw it unfold in one terrible heartbeat. A gun muzzle flashed. Elias spun. His rifle fell before he did. Papa! Clara screamed. She bolted out the door. But Wade, trembling, panic in his eyes, grabbed her. Clara, no! They'll kill you! Let go of me! Another shot tore bark from the porch beam inches from her face. Wade dragged her inside as bullets shredded the doorway. Outside, Malachi charged through the chaos with 3 ranch hand hands at his back, shouting for them to push the riders west. But more men broke off, calling his name like a hunt cry. Boone! Bring us Boone! Clara clawed toward the doorway, sobbing. He'll die alone. Let me go. No, Wade said, even as fear shook his voice. Those men, they ain't after Reeves. They want him. Through the window, Clara watched riders peel Malachi away from the ranch, forcing him toward the dark silhouette of Boone Hollow, the empty land that once held his family's home. Why? Her voice cracked. Why are they dragging him there? Doc Ortiz, crouched beside her, whispered bitterly, "Because some nightmares come full circle, Nina." Outside, Malachi sprinted across the rocky flats, but a bullet struck his shoulder. He stumbled, fell, rolled down the slope toward Boone Hollow's dried creek bed, and when he hit the mud, the world inside him split open. The scream of a younger boy, his own, echoed in his skull. Hands tied behind a feed trough, Sheriff Cage's laugh, Papa shouting his name, gunshots, fire swallowing the Boone cabin, papers burning, land deeds turning to ash. Malachi gasped, half in the present, half trapped in the night that made him a ghost. He crawled to his knees, blood running warm down his arm. "Not again," he whispered. "God, not again." Behind him, riders closed in, their torches glowing like the night of Boone Homestead's death. Clara saw it all from the window, saw her father bleeding in the dirt, saw the man who had saved her being hunted back into his own nightmare, and something inside her shattered, so completely it felt like she'd never breathe right again. Twin Mesas burned. Her father lay unconscious, and Malachi Boone, her rescuer, her anchor, was being dragged into hell for a second time. Nothing was left standing inside her but one truth. If she didn't fight back now, she'd lose everything that ever mattered. By the time morning light crept over dry cedar, the whole valley felt wrong, like it had woken up holding its breath. Smoke still drifted from the direction of Twin Mesas, curling into the pale sky like a dying prayer. The world had changed overnight, and Clara Reeves felt it in her bones. Her father had been carried home half-conscious, shirt soaked with blood, breath thin as paper. The doctor said he might live, said he might not. But Malachi hadn't returned at all. Clara kept waiting for the sound of his horse, kept watching the tree line for his silhouette. But all she heard was the creaking of broken wood and the hush of people avoiding her eyes. Then Lucy grabbed her hand. "Clara, you need to come. Now." Lucy didn't explain. She just ran. Clara followed, ribs burning with each step. They hurried down Dry Cedar's main street until noise, too much noise, hit Clara like a hammer. A crowd, a rope, a makeshift gallows built in front of the general store, and beneath it, Malachi Boone. Clara's heart sank so hard she nearly dropped to her knees. He stood tall despite the blood on his face, wrists bound, shirt torn from the fight. Dust streaked his jaw. His lip was split. His eyes were steady. Haunted, yes, but unbroken. Sheriff Dalton Cage stood beside him, badge gleaming like a lie in sunlight. "Citizens of Dry Cedar," Cage called out, raising his hands like a preacher with poison in his veins. "We got ourselves the man responsible for last night's carnage. Red Rock riders were seen with him. Fires, gunshots. He brought every bit of hell right to our valley." "He didn't," Clara choked out. Heads turned. Whispers rose. Lucy squeezed her hand, terrified. Cage's smile widened, just a little. "Well, Miss Reeves, Good to see you standing. Thought your daddy might have died defending that ranch of yours. Shame he had to fight Boone's battles. That's not what happened, Clara said, voice shaking. Malachi saved us. Is that right? Cage drawled. Because the valley saw plenty of bodies last night. Reeves ranch hands, local boys, and every trail points straight back to him. Always does. The crowd murmured. Fear, confusion, prejudice. The messy mix Cage loved to stir. Clara stepped forward despite Lucy tugging her back. Let him go. Cage snorted. Let him go? After what he's done? After what he is? Malachi lifted his head then. And for the first time since she arrived, he looked at Clara. Not pleading, not begging, just asking. Will you stand by me, or stay silent like everyone else? That look steadied something inside her. Clara climbed the steps to the gallows. Cage stiffened. Girl, get down from there. No. She stood so close she could see the rope fibers brushing Malachi's shoulder. Her hands trembled as she touched the knot, feeling the roughness of it, feeling how close he was to dying. The crowd went silent. Miss Reeves, Cage warned, this ain't your place. It is, Clara said, voice firming. You keep telling this town that Malachi Boone brought trouble. But trouble came because of you. Because of Pike. Because of lies you've kept buried. Cage's jaw twitched. I'd watch my tongue if I was you. No, Clara said. I'm done watching. And she pulled the rope off Malachi's neck. Gasps exploded across the square. Cage reached for his gun. Girl! Clara spun on him, voice rising in a raw, desperate cry that cracked through the morning air. You want the truth? I was going to sell myself to Harlan Pike to pay my father's debt, and he kept that contract locked in a vault with a deed, one that still had the name Boone Homestead under ours. Shock rippled through the crowd like a wave hitting shore. Clara stepped forward, fury and shame and clarity burning through her. My family didn't steal that land, but someone else did. Someone with power, someone with a badge. Cage's gun hand shook. You don't know what you're talking about, he snarled. Don't I? Clara shouted back. Red Rock Riders didn't attack for us. They attacked for papers, for proof, for the secret you've been guarding since the night Boone Homestead burned. Murmurs sharpened into shouts. Boone Homestead. That was Cage's district. He was deputy back then. Why'd the deed change hands? Why'd Red Rock Riders answer to Pike? Cage raised his gun toward her, voice cracking. You shut your mouth now. No! Clara cried. Lucy screamed. Voices erupted. Someone shouted for Cage to lower his weapon. Malachi, still bound, stepped between Clara and the barrel of that gun, body tense like a shield. She has nothing to do with your sins, Cage. You should have died with your family, Cage spat. World'd be better off. That landed like a gunshot through the entire square. Every breath, every whisper fell dead. Now it wasn't just prejudice, not fear. It was confession. A woman whispered, He knew what happened at Boone Homestead. Clara felt the world tilt. She stepped forward, voice calm but fierce. If Malachi Boone is guilty, then so am I. Silence. You want to hang him? Her voice rose, trembling, unstoppable. Then hang me too, because I survived because of him. I stand here because of him, and I won't let you kill him for your lies. The crowd split, some moving toward Clara to shield her, others toward Cage in fury. Cage looked around, saw the ground shifting under him, and panic flickered across his face. "Take them!" he barked. "Both of them!" But no one moved. Not one hand reached for Clara. Not one dared touch Malachi now. Cage's power, his story, was breaking apart right in front of him. Clara, breath shaking, tears streaking her cheeks, realized she had done something she never believed she could. She cut a rope. Not just the one around Malachi's neck, but the one around her own. Malachi looked at her with something close to awe. Not gratitude, not desperation, but recognition. You saved me. And now, I can fight again. The crowd erupted in shouts, and Cage stumbled back, overwhelmed, outnumbered. And for the first time since the fire at Boone Homestead, Malachi Boone saw a future where he wasn't, standing alone. Dry Cedar had never seen a morning like that. A morning where the sheriff stood shaking in his own shadow, and a crowd of ordinary folks realized they'd been following the wrong man for years. Cage tried to bark orders, but the spell was broken. Suspicion had sunk its claws in. And in that crack of doubt, Doc Ortiz stepped forward, her voice steady as iron. "We're not done here," she said. "But hanging Boone without the truth ain't justice. We bring all of 'em in. Pike, the riders, everyone." People murmured, emboldened by Clara's stand, by Cage's cracks, by the way Malachi had put himself between a gun and a woman everyone assumed he'd leave behind. Something had shifted, something big. Clara moved beside Malachi, untied his wrists with shaking hands. He hissed at the burn on his skin, but didn't pull away. "You okay?" she whispered. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm standing." Clara nodded. "Good, because we're not done." That simple sentence, "we're not done," settled in Malachi's chest like a coal warming into flame. Scene: mustering the posse. Pike, realizing his sheriff no longer held the crowd, had fled at dawn with the remaining riders. Rumor said he was holed up near the burned-out ruins of Boone Homestead, where the riders kept stashes of guns, and where the valley's bloodiest stories had begun. It was Lucy who said it first. "We have to go after them." The crowd stirred. Wade stepped forward, hat in hand, guilt all over him. "I didn't back Boone when the ranch was attacked." I froze. "But I won't freeze now." Others joined in. Ranch hands, homesteaders, townsfolk with more conscience than fear. Within minutes, a posse formed, not under Cage's command, but under something cleaner: the need to finally set things right. Malachi swung into the saddle with a grim, quiet determination. Clara climbed up behind him. Doc Ortiz demanded she ride with someone in case her ribs gave out. But Clara only cared about one thing: finishing what had started. "You don't have to come," Malachi murmured. She wrapped an arm around him, not out of romance but survival. "Time 600. I do." He didn't argue. Some people earned the right to stand beside you. Return to Boone Hollow. Boone Hollow looked exactly as it had in Malachi's nightmares. Charred posts half buried in weeds, the broken stone chimney of his childhood home, the creek bed where he'd lain bleeding as a boy. The air tasted of dry ash, even decades later. Pike's men were dug in behind the rocks. They knew the terrain, but so did Malachi. He pointed to ridges only a Boone would remember, to blind corners he'd once used to play hide-and-seek with his sister. "Split into 2 groups," he ordered quietly. "Use that gully. Watch for crossfire from the south." Clara watched him, struck by how someone so soft-spoken could command a battlefield without raising his voice. Trauma hadn't broken him. It had made him precise. The first bullet whizzed past. Clara ducked behind a boulder. Malachi fired back. Not with panic, but with calculated rhythm. The posse advanced. Riders scattered. A gunman tried to flank them from the ridge. Malachi's horse reared. Clara grabbed the spare revolver from his saddlebag and fired, striking the man's arm and knocking him off his perch. Malachi stared at her, stunned. "You saved my hide." Clara swallowed. "We're even then." He didn't reply, but the corner of his mouth twitched. They pushed deeper into the ruins. Pike was nowhere to be seen, but Sheriff Cage was. He'd snuck out of dry cedar, hoping to cover Pike's escape or erase the last pieces of evidence tying him to Boone Homestead. Cage crouched behind a fallen beam, revolver in hand, breathing like a cornered animal. Malachi stepped into the clearing just as Cage fired. Clara screamed. The bullet grazed her shoulder, spinning her backward. She hit the dirt hard. Malachi's world snapped. He charged. Cage scrambled, firing wildly. But Malachi closed the distance like a shadow come alive. He knocked the gun from Cage's hand, slammed him against a burned beam, pressed his revolver to the sheriff's temple. Everything went silent. Riders groaning on the ground, the posse watching with wide, trembling eyes. Time 1,200 pounds. Even the wind paused. Cage's breath hitched. "You want revenge, Boone? Go on. Be the savage they say you are." Malachi's jaw clenched. Flash. His father falling, his mother screaming, fire swallowing the Boone house. A young Malachi tied and helpless while Cage laughed. The past flooded him. He could end it. End Cage. End the nightmares. End the man who stole everything from him. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Malachi." Clara's voice, weak but fierce. She pushed herself to her knees, blood soaking her sleeve. "If you kill him, they win." "They always said justice wasn't for men like you," she whispered. "Prove them wrong." Malachi's hand trembled. Rage clawed at him. "Look at me." He did. Her eyes, steady, wounded but unbroken, held him there. "You don't have to live by the pain they left you," she said. Not anymore. Malachi exhaled, long, shaking, painful. Then he dropped the gun. The thud echoed across the clearing. He hauled Cage upright, bound him with an old leather bridle. "You're going to stand trial," Malachi said, voice low but solid. "Not in Dry Cedar, where you twisted fear into law. In Cheyenne, where truth still means something." Cage spat blood. "You're a fool." "No," Malachi said. "I'm done letting your ghosts live in me." Behind them, Pike stumbled from hiding and broke instantly. He confessed everything as he tried to run. The deal for the land, the staged fire, the forged signatures, the riders hired to intimidate farmers. The posse tackled him before he got 10 steps. Malachi turned to Clara, leaning on a rock, pale but conscious. He knelt beside her. "You hurt bad?" "Just bled dramatic," she whispered, a weak smile tugging at her lips. "Thought you could use the distraction." He laughed, quiet, disbelieving, almost broken from relief. "You're something else, Clara Reeves." She touched his shoulder, eyes bright with pain and pride. "So are you, Malachi Boone. You chose justice over vengeance. You chose a future." His throat tightened. He covered her hand with his own. For the first time since his childhood fire, the smoke around Boone Hollow didn't taste like death. It tasted like a beginning. The ride back to Dry Cedar was quieter than anyone expected. Cage was tied across a wagon bench, wrists bound with the same leather bridle he once used to bully ranchers into submission. Pike sat beside him, shaking so hard his boots rattled against the wood. Behind the wagon, the surviving Red Rock riders trudged under guard, defeated and pale beneath the rising sun. But the strangest part wasn't the prisoners. It was the townspeople, walking beside the posse instead of hiding behind doors, watching Malachi Boone without fear, watching Clara Reeves with something close to respect, almost like the valley had blinked awake from a long, ugly nightmare. Doc Ortiz rode up beside Clara, checking the bandage on her shoulder. "You push that arm too hard. It'll tear right open." Clara grimaced. "Hurts less than watching Cage nearly kill Malachi." Doc blew out a slow breath. "You changed the town today, mija." "No," Clara whispered, watching Malachi ride a little ahead, posture heavy but alive. "We changed it." Scene: the hearing. By afternoon, word had spread all the way to Fort Desolation and Pine Hollow Canyon. The sheriff had been arrested by his own people. A courier from Cheyenne arrived before sundown carrying an official decree. The governor wanted an inquiry. A federal judge was en route. Until then, Dry Cedar would operate under watch. The whole town gathered in the old church-turned meeting hall. People filled pews, aisles, windowsills. Kids sat on the floor. Ranch hands leaned in through the doors. At the front stood Clara, Malachi, Doc Ortiz, and a stiff-backed man in a dark wool coat, the governor's appointed legal representative, Judge Raymond Hollis. Judge Hollis took off his hat, scanned the crowd with a cool, even stare, and spoke. "This valley has carried a wound for too long. Boone Homestead burned. Land changed hands overnight. Men died without justice. Today, we will set the record straight. Malachi bowed his head. Clara noticed his hands tremble once, barely, and it nearly broke her heart. Judge Hollis read testimonies one by one. Doc Ortiz describing the contracts Pike hid. Time 500 Mwong. Wade describing the riders bragging about finishing the job they started years ago. Lucy describing overheard threats at the saloon. And finally, Pike's recorded confession. When Malachi stepped forward to speak, the entire room held its breath. "My family built that homestead," he said quietly. "My father died trying to protect it. Folks said we burned it ourselves, said we deserved it. Sheriff Cage used that lie to bury us. But I'm not here to tear this valley apart. I'm here because Clara Reeves stood up when no one else would." Clara felt every eye slide to her. A tremor ran through her chest, but she stood straighter. Malachi's voice softened. "I don't want revenge. I want the truth honored, and I want no child, Boone or Reeves or anybody else, left tied to a fence post ever again." A hush followed. Judge Hollis nodded slowly. "In light of the evidence," he said, "Boone Homestead was unlawfully taken. The subsequent sale to the Reeves family was built atop fraud." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guilt, anger, shock. Clara stepped forward. "Judge, my father didn't know. He wasn't told. He worked that land until it broke his back trying to set things right for me." Hollis regarded her with surprising gentleness. "And no one is claiming he did, Miss Reeves. Which brings us to the solution." The entire hall leaned in. "This land will not be seized from the Reeves family," Hollis said, "nor restored entirely to Boone. Instead, a shared title will be drafted. Boone and Reeves together. The remaining acreage," he motioned to the valley map, "shall be repurposed as community land for widows, orphans, victims of violence, and those driven off by men like Pike." A ripple moved through the room. Hesitation, confusion, awe. Clara swallowed hard. "A place for people with nowhere else to go?" Hollis nodded. "If you're willing to run it." Malachi stared at her. Soft, unsure, hopeful. Clara felt something shift inside her. Warm, painful, sacred. She stepped to the map, placed her palm over the land that once held her family's ranch, then slid it toward the outline of Boone Homestead. "This valley doesn't need more walls," she said softly. "It needs crossing paths, crossing hands." She lifted her head. "I propose we call it Crossing Hands Ranch." Silence hung suspended, then melted into murmurs. Respectful, relieved, moved. Judge Hollis smiled. Then it settled. Malachi turned toward Clara slowly, almost afraid to breathe. "You'd share your father's land with me? With my family's memory?" She met his gaze steadily. "Your family didn't lose that land. They had it stolen. And if I'm going to live with the truth, I want the truth to live here too." Malachi's throat tightened. He didn't speak. He couldn't. but the gratitude in his eyes nearly brought Clara to tears. A different kind of home. After the hearing, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Clara walked alone toward the steps of the meeting hall. Malachi followed quietly. "Clara," he said, voice low, rough. "You didn't have to say any of that." She brushed hair from her face. "Yes, I did. You'll lose land. I'll gain something better." "What?" She looked at him gently. "A future that isn't built on lies." His breath caught. For years, Malachi Boone had lived with his hands closed, holding grief, holding rage, holding every painful memory like something he couldn't afford to drop. But with Clara standing there, half her shoulder in bandages, dirt on her cheek, eyes lit with something honest and brave, he felt those hands finally opening, even if only a little. Clara squeezed his arm. "Tomorrow we start rebuilding. Together." Malachi nodded, voice trembling in his chest. "Together." Behind them, townsfolk began clearing chairs, sweeping dirt, talking softly about new boundaries and new beginnings. Dry cedar felt fragile, but for the first time in years, it also felt alive. And above the broken valley, the night settled warm and full of promise, because something long stolen had finally been returned: justice, truth, and the chance to build a home not just from land, but from healing. Time 200. The day Crossing Hands Ranch was approved. Dry cedar felt cleaner than it had in years. Dust still blew across the street. Buildings still leaned, and the valley still carried scars. But something fundamental had shifted. You could see it in people's eyes. Caution replaced by curiosity. Fear replaced by possibility. And in the quiet hours after sunset, the valley exhaled, like a body finally freed from a long-held breath. Clara Reeves should have been exhausted. Her shoulder throbbed. A bruise ran along her ribs. But she felt strangely alive, as if the fire that consumed Twin Mesas had lit something inside her too. Doc Ortiz insisted she rest at the old cabin on the northern ridge, the place that would soon become Crossing Hands Ranch headquarters. The cabin was simple: a porch, a lantern, the scent of fresh-cut lumber waiting to be rewritten into a new story. Clara stepped onto the porch, watching the sky deepen into purples and golds. She hugged her shawl closer, breathing in the clean, cool air. Behind her, the porch creaked. Malachi Boone stepped into the lantern glow. He looked different tonight. Not just tired, but unburdened. A man still haunted, but with something gentler flickering beneath the shadows. "You should be resting," Clara said softly. He glanced at her shoulder. "Funny. I came to tell you the same thing." She laughed quietly. He eased onto the step beside her. Close enough she felt his warmth, but not touching. Malachi Boone never assumed closeness. He always waited, as if every inch of space might change a life. Clara watched his hands, calloused, scarred, strong, Hands that fought for her, hands that carried her, hands that bled to keep her alive. "You did good today," Clara murmured. He shook his head slowly. "You're the one who stood on that scaffold. You're the one who turned the whole valley around. I didn't do it alone." Malachi looked away, eyes on the dark horizon. "Clara, I need to say something before I lose my nerve." Her breath caught. "Malachi, you don't have to—" "I do." His voice cracked. "My whole life I thought I had two choices: hate what was done to me, or forget it. But today, between the shooting and Cage and your father's truth coming out, something made sense." He swallowed hard. "I don't want to live in the past anymore." Clara's throat tightened. "You won't have to." Still, he didn't look convinced. She reached into her pocket, palms unsteady, and pulled out the thin, frayed braid he'd given her that night on Twin Mesas. Dust, fire, blood, clinging to the leather. "Your bracelet," she whispered. His eyes softened. "It kept you alive." "No," Clara breathed, voice trembling. "You did." For the first time, Malachi's breath stumbled. She continued, "I want a new one. Not because the old one broke, but because—" her voice faltered. "Because something changed." Malachi reached to his wrist, to his own leather braid, older, thicker, worn with decades. Without a word, he began to undo the knot. The whisper of leather sliding free felt like the valley shedding an old layer of history. He sat forward, knees braced, head bowed. "You sure about this?" he murmured. Clara nodded. "Yes." He unbraided both strips, laying the pieces flat across his thigh like two stories finally opened. Lantern light danced on his hands. They trembled once, then steadied. He took half of hers, half of his, twisted them together, began braiding. Tight, certain, new. Clara watched, heart pounding, every pull of leather feeling like a vow. When he finished the first braid, he held it out. "For you." She slipped her wrist into it, the leather warm from his hands, from his heartbeat. Malachi wasn't done. He braided a second one, hers and his woven again. But this time his fingers didn't let go. Clara reached out, closed his hand around it. "For you," she whispered. He tied it on carefully, avoiding her gaze, as if looking directly at her might steal his breath. Silence settled. Not heavy, not tense, just full. Clara finally asked, "Malachi, why did you really come tonight?" He swallowed. "Because you stood up for me. Because you bled for me. Because you took land your father worked his whole life for, and put my family's name beside it." He looked at the ground. "No one's ever done that for me. No one's ever chosen me." Her chest ached. "I didn't choose you out of pity." "I know," he whispered. "That's what scares me." She reached out, slow, careful, and placed her fingers beneath his jaw, guiding his face toward hers. He didn't resist, but his breath came uneven. "I chose you," Clara said, "because you're worth choosing, because you fight for people even when this town hates you, because you see me, not as a debt, not as a burden, but as someone who deserves to stand." His eyes closed, lashes trembling. "And because," she whispered, voice breaking, "every time I picture a future that doesn't hurt, you're in it." The words hit him like a storm. He opened his eyes, shadowed, full, undone. "Clara," he breathed, "I don't know how to be loved." "Then let's learn together," she said, slowly. And finally, he let his forehead rest against hers. Not a kiss, not yet. Just a promise. Two wounded souls leaning close enough for the past to loosen and the future to take shape. Below them, the valley lay quiet. Above them, the stars began to bloom, and on their wrists, two newly braided leather bands, woven from broken pieces, caught the lantern light like twin sparks. The promise was simple, not spoken, but understood. From now on, neither of them would walk alone. A year passed, though some days it felt like a lifetime. Dry cedar had changed in ways no one would have believed the night Clara Reeves was found tied to a fence post. The buildings were still rough, the wind still sharp, the dust still eager to claim every coat and curtain. But the air carried something different now. Hope. Not loud or flashy, not the kind that shouts from rooftops, but a quiet, steady hope. Built one repaired fence, one shared meal, one honest conversation at a time. And at the center of it all was Crossing Hands Ranch. Seen. A living ranch. The ranch didn't start grand. It rose from old lumber, repurposed beams, and the sweat of every hand willing to help. Boone, Reeves, Doc Ortiz, Lucy, Wade, and dozens of others who needed the ranch as much as the ranch needed them. By the time summer rolled around again, the place felt alive. Children ran across the yard laughing. Some local, some from distant towns where fists and fear had been the law. Women hung laundry under the sun, speaking English, Spanish, and softer border tongues. Men fixed gates side by side who once would have crossed the street to avoid each other. Now, they passed each other tools. Progress wasn't perfect, but it was real. Clara Reeves stood in the doorway of the new teaching cabin, wiping chalk dust from her hands. A dozen children sat around the long table inside, reading from worn books, scratching letters on slate boards. "All right," she called with a smile. "Chores first. Then we meet again after supper." Groans rose up. Dramatic, theatrical. Clara laughed. "Trust me, if I can learn to mend fence wire with one good shoulder, you can sweep a floor." The kids scattered, some to the stable, some to the kitchen house, some to help Lucy in the garden. Clara watched them go with a mix of tenderness and awe. They weren't hers, but in a way, they were. Crossing Hands Ranch had become a home, and Clara had become its beating heart. She stepped outside, stretching her good arm as pain tugged faintly through the old wound. It never fully healed right. Doc Ortiz warned it might always ache. Clara didn't mind. It reminded her why the ranch existed. A few yards away, Malachi Boone was teaching a group of boys how to approach a horse safely. His voice carried low and patient across the yard. Don't grab her reins first. Let her smell you. Let her decide you're no danger. Horses don't forget kindness any more than they forget cruelty. Little Mateo lifted his hand nervously to the mare's nose. The horse bumped him gently, and that grin spread ear to ear. Malachi's smile was small, but unmistakably proud. Clara watched from the porch rail, warmth blooming in her chest. Once Malachi had been the most feared man in the valley. Silent, unknown, carrying a reputation stamped on him by prejudice and lies. Now he taught children, raised fences, fixed saddles, and came home every night with dust on his boots and a softness in his eyes only she ever saw fully. He looked up, caught her staring. "Something wrong?" he called. "No," Clara said, stepping down from the porch. "Just admiring the view." He wiped sweat from his brow, smirking. "The horses, or the chaos?" "Neither," she said, voice warm. "Just you." His smirk faltered, turning into something deeper, something that still shook him every time she said it. Before he could answer, Lucy hurried over, skirt swaying. "Clara," she called, "Doc needs your help. New family coming from Sweet Creek. 3 kids. Mama's limping pretty bad." Clara nodded. "Tell Doc I'm coming." She touched Malachi's arm as she passed. A small gesture, nothing dramatic. But he leaned into it like a man finding his ground. "That's the 3rd new family this month," he murmured. "I know. And we still have space," Clara said, determination gleaming in her eyes. "We make space." He watched her go, quick steps, purpose in every line of her body. And again, he felt the same thing he'd felt the day she stood between him and a gallows. Pride, gratitude, and something like faith. Scene. Healing work. Doc Ortiz moved quickly around the clinic cabin, treating cuts, bruises, infections, and wounds too old to fully heal. Women with eyes that had forgotten safety. Children who flinched at every loud sound. Clara joined her, washing hands, fetching bandages, whispering comfort to frightened kids. "You're good at this," Doc said under her breath as Clara wrapped a bandage. "No," Clara replied softly. "I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me sooner." Doc paused, warmth softening her gaze. "Mija, you're helping build something this valley's never had." Clara blinked back emotion. "Not alone." "Maybe not," Doc said, "but you gave it shape." Outside, children laughed. Inside, wounds were cleaned. Between the two, the ranch breathed with a rhythm that sounded a lot like healing. Evening walk. Evening settled gently across the valley. The sky burned orange, then softened to rose pink as lanterns flickered on along the porches. Dinner at Crossing Hands was always loud, plates clinking, kids chattering, Lucy scolding somebody for stealing biscuits. Malachi took his place near Clara, their shoulders brushing now and then in an easy, quiet closeness. After supper, they walked the fence line, a tradition they'd started months ago. Inspecting planks was just the excuse. Truth was, it gave them a moment alone. "You did good today," Clara said, nudging him. "Mateo trusts that mare because he trusts you." Malachi chuckled. "Took me a long time to learn trust goes two ways." She looked at him softly. "You've given this place more than you know." "So have you." She shook her head. "I gave it a name. You gave it a future." He stopped walking. "Clara." She turned. The lantern light caught the leather band on his wrist, the braid they'd woven together 1 year ago. He lifted her hand gently, thumb brushing across the matching band on hers. "These saved me," he murmured. "No," Clara whispered. "They just reminded you you're worth saving." A long moment passed. Quiet, full, steady. He brushed his thumb along her wrist. "You still believe that?" She smiled, soft but sure. "Every day." His breath caught, the way it always did when she touched a place in him he'd spent years trying to hide. "And you?" she asked gently. "You believe you deserve this? This ranch, these kids, this life?" He looked out over the rolling dark. Fences rebuilt, cabins lit, children safe inside. "For the first time," Malachi said, voice steady, "I think I'm learning to." Clara squeezed his hand. "That's enough. That's all I want." He leaned down, forehead resting against hers. Just like that first night they braided the leather bands. Different now. Stronger. Steadier. Chosen. 2 lives rebuilt. 2 hands crossing. Not as obligation. Not as debt, but as home. Behind them, Crossing Hands Ranch glowed warm against the night. Lantern light flickering like a heartbeat, holding every soul inside it with gentle, certain promise. And Clara Reeves, once tied to a fence post, once stripped of hope, now stood wrapped in the kind of safety she never believed she'd find. A future that didn't hurt. A community that healed. And a man who chose her. Not from rescue. Not from need. But from truth. Autumn settled soft over dry cedar. The kind that warmed the skin but cooled the breath. Crossing Hands Ranch had grown into the one thing the valley had never truly known. A refuge that didn't care about color, history, or the weight someone carried when they showed up at the gate. But the ranch still had one thing left unfinished: its entrance. Malachi Boone believed a home wasn't complete until it had a doorway people could walk through, knowing they weren't stepping into danger. So for weeks, he worked the front pasture, planing, carving, sanding. When the final cedar beam rose into place, Clara Reeves found him brushing the dust off with the quiet care of a man polishing memory. The archway curved high, made of reclaimed cedar, joined at the top by a carved emblem, two hands crossing, not clasped, not gripping, just meeting, equal. Clara stopped a few paces away, breath catching. Malachi, it's beautiful. He didn't look up immediately. It needed to be right. It is, she whispered. Only then did he face her, eyes gentle in a way that still surprised her. I added something. She stepped closer and saw them. Two leather bands hung from a carved peg near the top. The original braids, his and hers, smoked, darkened, stiff with age, but still whole. Her breath trembled. Why put them here? Malachi traced the wood lightly. Because this place started the same night we braided the new ones. These, he tapped the leather gently, belong at the door. To remind people broken things can be made new. Clara swallowed past the emotion rising in her chest. Before she could answer, a boy shouted from the yard, "Mr. Boone! Miss Clara! Someone's coming!" They turned. A wagon approached, slow and tired. A thin horse, ribs showing. A woman at the reins, wrapped in a worn shawl. Two children beside her, one barely walking, the other clutching a wooden horse carved from scrap. The wagon creaked to a stop. The woman looked terrified, but behind the fear, something fragile, a hope fighting to live. Is this? She asked shakily. Is this the place folks call crossing hands? Clara stepped forward. Yes, ma'am. It is. We heard, her voice cracked. We heard you take in people with nowhere left. My husband. He weren't a kind man. We ran. We've been running 3 days. Malachi approached slowly, palms visible, voice soft. You're safe now. The smaller child reached for Clara, arms lifted in pure exhaustion. Clara held her gently, and the woman sagged with relief. You ain't running anymore, Malachi said. Clara crouched beside the older boy. I like your horse. He held it tighter. My paw broke the other one. Clara drew a tiny figurine from her pocket. 2 horses side by side. We fix things here, she whispered. We can fix yours too. The boy blinked. Can we stay? Clara's heart tightened. Yes, as long as you need. Lucy hurried over with a blanket. Let's get y'all settled. Malachi lifted the toddler, the child curling instantly into his chest. You're good with them, Clara murmured as they walked. His cheeks warmed. Kids see truth fast. They know when someone ain't a threat. Then you must be one of the most trustworthy men alive, she teased. He gave a shy smirk. Guess so. They walked the family toward the new gate. At the archway, the boy tugged Clara's sleeve. What's them hands mean? Clara glanced up at the carving. It means 2 people met in the middle, even when the world tried to keep them apart. The woman and her children stepped through the gate, the first to enter Crossing Hands Ranch through its finished doorway. Something settled around them then. Quiet, warm, grounding. A beginning. Clara watched the sunlight spill over the cabins, the garden, the people rebuilding themselves piece by piece. A year ago, she'd been tied to a fence post, bruised, half-conscious, believing she had nothing left. Now she stood beside a man who'd been burdened by a past he never deserved, and together they were building something the whole valley could lean on. "Malachi," she whispered. He turned. "Time 700. This ranch wouldn't exist without you." His breath shook. "Wouldn't exist without you either." She reached for his hand. Their leather bands brushed. "Funny," Clara said softly. "How broken pieces make the strongest braid." He looked at her the way a man looks at the place he finally belongs. "You ready for another beginning?" she asked. He squeezed her hand. "With you, always." Together, they stepped under the arch, hand in hand, following the family inside. Behind them, the gate creaked in the wind, the leather bands tapping against cedar like a heartbeat. No one tied here again. Not anymore. Not ever. Thank you for riding with us through this journey across dry Cedar Valley. Stories like Clara and Malachi's remind us that even in the harshest places, kindness still takes root. If this tale touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from. And if you enjoyed this episode, give it a like, hit subscribe, and tap that bell so you won't miss the next chapter. Till next time, partners.